Well, good morning, Canada, and welcome back to a freezing Saturday in December. If you're watching this with a hot coffee, good choice. And if you're watching this from a beach in the Caribbean, good on you. Enjoy that sunshine while the rest of us pretend we're fine.
Now, let's take a deep breath and get comfortable because for once, we're starting a Saturday with good news instead of stress.
But before we get into it, here's a question for you this morning. How are you feeling about Canada's economy right now? Hopeful, cautious, or still not convinced?
Tell us in the comments, and we read everything because you know what? Your answers actually help share what we may cover next.
So let's get into it. Canada's unemployment rate just dropped to 6.5% in November. That's the lowest it's been in 16 months. And it happened at the exact moment everyone thought we were headed for layoffs because of Trump's tariffs.
Yeah, economists were practically bracing for impact. They were expecting job losses, and they're expecting unemployment to rise to 7%. Instead, employers added more than 53,000 jobs in November and around 180,000 jobs in the last 3 months. That basically replaces all the jobs we lost over the summer.
And this turnaround has been fast. Unemployment climbed all year and hit 7.1% in August, the highest we'd seen since 2016 if you take out the pandemic. But in just 2 months, it fell by 0.6. Now, economists say the last time we saw a drop like that was back in the late 90s when the tech sector was exploding. So this isn't a tiny improvement. This is a real shift in the curve.
And while Canada is surprising people in a good way, the U.S. is dealing with the downside of Trump's tariff everything idea. Prices are up, manufacturers are nervous, investors don't know what's coming next, and a lot of that time is being spent on political drama instead of actual planning.
And here's the interesting part. Trump slapped tariffs on Canada to punish us. But it's the U.S. that's now paying the price with higher costs and shaky investment. Meanwhile, our job market held up, and the trouble stayed mostly in the sectors hit hard by tariffs instead of spreading everywhere.
Yes, Stats Canada numbers show the layoff rate is sitting at 0.7%. That's almost the same as last year at the same time. It's right down the line where we were before the pandemic. So, no, we're not seeing a meltdown. In fact, it actually got a bit easier to find work in November. Almost 20% of people who were unemployed in October found a job in November. And that's better than the year before.
Now, compare that with the U.S., where Trump keeps saying tariffs will bring jobs home. But they're just not. And really, trusting a man who bankrupted casinos and ran a charity into the ground is not exactly a recipe for economic stability. Meanwhile, companies are quietly cutting hours, delaying projects, or moving production somewhere else, including right here in Canada. The speech is all about winning, but the numbers say something very different down there.
Now, Canada's job story isn't perfect, but honestly, for the year we've had, this is a much stronger finish than anyone predicted. A lot of November's gains came from part-time work, around 63,000 jobs, and most of that growth came from younger workers who really struggled this summer. But here's where we saw real steady growth. Healthcare and social assistance kept hiring. Accommodation and food services, they added jobs. And natural resources, that was bumped up too. These are real sectors with real Canadians working in them.
Now, wholesale and retail trade were the weak spots. They lost about 34,000 jobs, and when you think about it, it makes sense. That's exactly where you'd see nerves about tariffs, higher costs, and softer consumer spending.
But even with those weak spots, Canada's economy surprised everyone this fall. With the third quarter, we posted a GDP growth number of 2.6%, when the Bank of Canada expected only 0.5%. Half! We came in 5 times stronger than the forecast. And in economic terms, well, that's basically a mic drop.
Now, to be clear, that growth didn't happen because everyone suddenly had extra cash. It happened because we bought less from other countries for a little while. When imports drop, the math pushes GDP up. It doesn't mean everyone is throwing money around.
It's not about Canadians feeling richer. It just means that the numbers lined up in a way that gave the economy a helpful boost at the perfect moment.
And honestly, we'll take it. After the year we've had, from global uncertainty to tariffs to nonstop noise from outside of our borders, a win is a win. And this one is worth celebrating.
But even with all that context, the story is pretty simple. We're not in a recession. Far from it. The Bank of Canada lowered interest rates twice this year to give people a bit of breathing room, and everyone assumed more cuts were coming. But when more people are finding jobs and prices are still a little high, that tells the bank that the economy is doing okay. So they don't need to rush in with another cut. And that's actually good news. It means things are more stable than people thought.
And the market saw it instantly. Bond yields jumped, the Canadian dollar ticked up, all those boring grown-up indicators that quietly say, hey, this economy is holding together. Not exactly what you'd expect if tariffs had knocked us flat on our face.
So how did this all happen? Well, instead of standing at a podium and yelling about it, we quietly got to work. We built new trade works, found new partners, and started investing heavily on industries that create jobs here instead of relying on whatever mood Trump is in this week.
And that's where the defense spending comes in. Mark Carney has already committed to raising defense investment to 5% of our whole economy by 2035. Now, that's not just ships and jets. That's shipyards, aerospace, minerals, robotics, engineering, manufacturing, basically the entire ecosystem of jobs that can't be outsourced.
It's a direct answer to these stupid tariffs, but it's also something bigger, a plan to stop depending on the U.S. for everything. If the global winds shift, and they have, we're creating brand new engines.
So right now, the contrast couldn't be clearer. Canada's unemployment just hit the lowest point in 16 months. The layoff rate is steady, and people are finding work slightly faster than they were last year.
Meanwhile, the U.S. is still stuck in that never-ending loop of billionaires celebrating record profits, giant companies are merging like it's a hobby, and Trump becoming even more unhinged every day. He's even out there canceling Juneteenth and Martin Luther King Jr. Day as free national parks days, and he's replacing them with, get this, his own birthday. It's just a lot of noise with not a lot of progress.
And if you line up the two stories side by side, what do you see? You see one country is using this moment to rebuild, to create jobs, strengthen supply chains, and make more of what we need right here at home. Meanwhile, the other, the U.S., under Trump, feels like it's stuck in reverse. Allies are stepping back, trade ties are fraying, and global partners are basically counting the days until they can deal with an administration that isn't rewriting the rules every morning on social media. So, one country's moving forward, and the other is just wearing itself out.
And that brings us to the real question. What do these job numbers actually mean for Canadians?
And what do they tell us about the very different paths that Canada and the U.S. are choosing right now? So, let's break it down in plain English. What do these numbers mean for you, your family, and everyday parts of life? You know, the bills, the jobs, the stability that we all want.
First, it means the job market is not shrinking. It's growing. Slowly, yes. Perfectly? No. But growing. And in a year where everyone expected the opposite, that matters. It means people still have options. It means the floor isn't falling out from under us.
Second, it means Canada isn't getting swept into the same economic storm as the U.S. Now, we're not immune, nobody is, but we're not following them down the same hole. They're dealing with a new world order where Europe is the enemy and oligarchs are allies, and federal agencies are getting overruled by Trump when they don't say exactly what he wants. It's not exactly the kind of environment that encourages investment.
And Canada? We're trying to build steady, grown-up stability. Steady inflation, steady jobs, steady growth. Hey, it's not flashy and it doesn't go viral on social media, but it's what makes a country livable. Canada benefits when the world sees us as calm, predictable, and stable, especially right now. Investors notice, companies notice, countries looking for partners, they notice.
This is why we're seeing all the interest in Canada's minerals, our ports, our shipping routes, our energy sector, our tech, and military investment. When the biggest economy in the world is wobbling, well, everybody looks for the most stable chair in the room. And right now, Canada's looking pretty steady.
Another thing these job numbers tell us is that people are still spending. They're carefully spending, but they're spending. That means they have enough confidence not to slam the brakes on their lives. A family that upgrades their new car or books a vacation or renovates their kitchens, that's all a sign that they aren't terrified about what's coming next.
Now, contrast that with the U.S., where you've got people juggling higher prices, higher debt, higher uncertainty, and a president who wakes up and invents new economic rules on the fly. That is the opposite of stability.
And the world sees it. Countries that used to automatically follow Washington's lead are now hedging their bets. They're signing new deals with Europe, Asia, and yes, Canada, because they don't know what tomorrow morning's Truth Social rant is going to say.
And here's the bigger picture. Canada isn't just reacting to Trump. We're reshaping our economy. The defense spending plan alone is one of the biggest industrial opportunities we've had in decades. The energy transition is another. Critical minerals, another. Arctic shipping routes, another. You see a pattern here?
And these aren't short-term election promises. These are the kind of projects that build careers, entire lifetimes of work for engineers, welders, scientists, tradespeople, builders, designers, coders. Real people, real job. Hey, it's nation building like Carney promised.
And here's the part that makes me the most hopeful. Canada isn't just making band-aid solutions until the US comes to its senses. We're building things that will outlast every tariff Trump throws at us.
Now, does this mean everything is smooth sailing? Well, no. Productivity needs work, businesses need confidence, people need support through this transition. And wages, they need to climb faster than they are.
But we're doing something the US isn't doing right now. We're planning, we're adjusting, we're helping the sectors hit hardest, and we're choosing long-term stability instead of short-term chaos. Canada isn't waiting for the storm to magically disappear. We're building a stronger roof.
So when you see that unemployment number of 6.5%, you have to understand what it represents. It's not perfection, it's not a miracle, but it is resilience. It's actual resilience in the middle of a global mess.
And honestly, that's something Canadians don't ever give themselves enough credit for. We get knocked around, we complain about it over coffee, and then we figure it out quietly while everyone else keeps yelling.
These job numbers also tell us something important about who we're becoming as a country. More independent, more self-sufficient, more willing to take a different path than the US when it's the right thing to do.
And maybe that's a silver lining of Trump 2.0. He forced us to grow up economically, to look beyond one partner, to build our own capacity, to realize that we can stand on our own 2 feet and to unite as a country.
Will things still be tough? Sure. But tough is different from hopeless. And Canada is nowhere near hopeless.
So if you woke up this morning thinking everything was falling apart, it's not. The numbers say so. The trend says so. The world watching us says so.
And honestly, after dealing with that buffoon south of the border for 12 long months, ending December with some pretty good news feels really great.
All right, Kenna. Before we sign off, a quick reminder. If you want to support the channel, check out our merch store. Every shirt, mug, and hoodie helps us keep making these videos.
And if you want some behind-the-scenes extras, join the A-Team. We've got some bonus content and the occasional blooper, like this morning when I posted our rough cut to everyone instead of the A-Team only. Whoops.
Oops. Listen, it was early, you hadn't had coffee, and apparently you can't be trusted with buttons before 9 a.m.
Aw, thanks so much, Dave. You're so supportive when I messed up.
I try.
And don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and click on the bell so you get notifications because we put out a brand new episode every day at 12 noon, rain, shine, or snow.
And don't forget, share this with someone who could use a little good news today. There's enough doom and gloom in the world. It feels nice to pass along something positive for once. Thanks for watching. We'll see everybody tomorrow. Stay warm, stay hopeful, and stay Canadian.
Ciao for now.